going,
Love it.
Lucy?
It's going good. I'm surviving. I'm like glued to the TV. Uh, but I think it's good.
Yeah, haven't we all been for a few days for sure? Um, so Lucy, I'm sure you were born into sustainability and being a steward of the environment. Is that pretty much true?
Was I born into it?
Yeah. What was
No, I
your
mean, I,
journey?
I came around to it. Well, I'll tell you my journey. I'll give you background. So, hi, everybody. This has been a great event, by the way. I've been loving listening to everyone's talks. Bob, your talk at the top was great. And then all the other speakers have been awesome. So I feel very inspired, and I feel like I'm with a bunch of like-minded people because my series, One Small Step, it's about solutions and really highlighting all the amazing work that's out there that's trying to make our world more sustainable and solve some of the biggest problems that we face. But to answer your question, Bob, my journey began when I was a producer at Now This, where I still work, back in 2016, and I covered the Standing Rock protests from our office in New York, and ended up traveling out there and just being on the ground with all the people who were fighting this climate fight against this oil pipeline. Really just opened my eyes to the fact that like climate change isn't something that's going to happen in 10 years. It's happening now. And it's really possible to become part of the fight, part of the solution, and not just sort of sit on the sidelines and think, oh, other people will figure it out. And so I just started asking questions like, what happens to our recycling? How does composting work? How do I donate my clothes? Is that something that's possible? And so that from that like question asking and curiosity, my series, One Small Step, was born, which is focused on solutions and steps that we can all take. And it's crazy. It's a complicated topic for sure.
I mean, it's a big topic, but I was actually intrigued. Well, first off, if y'all haven't seen her Instagram account, it's amazing. She's got amazing energy, and it is so cool. But when I first learned about you and I saw One Small Step, why the term One Small Step? Because some might say, let's take a really big step. Let's go crazy. What's the whole concept around that whole name?
I think the idea is that, just taking one small step can create momentum in your life, and you can start to really build up these small steps that can like lead to big change. I think a lot of times it's so overwhelming, this topic of climate change. Obviously, it's facing the whole planet. We're going to need systems changes, but I don't think we need to just be on the sidelines being afraid and hoping for the best. You can make impacts in your life, obviously, with voting, which we know is very, very important, but also just supporting the programs that already exist. There's so many cool programs out there. Like in New York City, we have this awesome composting program that's been around for 30 years. And I always am advocating, or I'm always signal boosting them on my Instagram to other young people in New York, because you might not even know it's there. And I think we have to, support these organizations that are already out there that are doing the work. And, the more that they can support them, they'll get the money from policymakers and, get the visibility that they deserve. So the small steps lead to big change.
Small steps lead to big changes. How do we get more people involved in this? Because, you had your sort of epiphany moment when you went out and covered what was really very interesting event from an environmental standpoint. There's a lot of people who haven't really heard the messages and haven't really been impacted. How do we get people to get behind this, and maybe also think about how do we get them sort of incented to do the right things?
It's really, really hard. And I think that my answer is always changing the more that I learn, because I wish I could say, well, if people just have a moment and understand that they're going to do the right thing. And I just don't think that that's human nature, sadly. Some of us will, some of us won't. And then we see something with like COVID-19, and all of a sudden everyone has the disposable masks and they're buying the aerosol, and all of our best laid plans were really thrown out the window. And so I love what you all are doing, because you're kind of creating a solution for a problem where you would be creating almost a value for something that right now, plastic waste, these contaminated plastics, don't have value. And as much as I would love to say that everyone is like with their, hearts in their sleeves is going and picking up litter, like I love to do that too. And, bringing their own cups, like until this problem is seen as something that is valuable to solve, I don't see it being solved at the scale that we need it to be solved. That's my personal, I'd be interested to hear what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I mean, going back a long time, I've evolved in this thinking around incentives, and I really wish that we would all just sort of inherently do the good thing or the right
Mm,
thing, or what we think is good. But it can be challenging, right? When you think about families that are working really hard, maybe they have kids or don't or whatever, and they're living in the here and now. So I think that if we can do something like I think we're doing in part here at Brightmark, we make it so it's in everyone's benefit to do the great things. Um, I do think that there's another aspect of this where maybe we need to affect policy, because one of the things we have is, and I tell the Brightmark team and others this pretty frequently, we have the wrong sort of signals around things that we buy or use. So back in the day when solar and wind were coming out, it was way more expensive to buy solar and wind compared to coal-fired power, right? And yet we knew very clearly that if you were to look at the impact on the environment of the two, frankly, coal should cost you more. So I think there's a policy
right.
side to this too as well. So for me, but if you can start with a win-win, like we talked about our RNG projects, or even taking plastic that we throw away that has unlocked value, those are great. I don't think it's going to do it all, though. It's my
Yeah. The value thing is so true though, because right now we don't see a lot of the cost. And so, like you're saying, like coal, it actually has such a higher cost to our planet. And so, but we're not paying for that. Same thing with our waste right now. It's so out of sight, out of mind. And so we don't calculate the cost of it once it leaves us, if it's lasting, you know, 1,000 years, or worse, it's becoming ocean pollution. Like that cost is very hard to quantify, and that's a challenge. And I think, yeah, you're right, policy somehow making that cost more visible.
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is we do pay for it. The problem is it's super hard to measure at the
Right.
time, because the health effects may impact generations in the future or us many years. And as human beings, we can be pretty simple creatures. We're all about the here and now. So that's a challenge that we
Right.
definitely need to work. Policy, and you talked about voting, I think is a really big deal. You mentioned COVID. So what have you seen on the ground with respect to COVID and what's gone on here?
COVID, I mean, it's impacted everybody so seriously. I mean, I think that what we've seen is that the impact COVID has in your life varies so much depending on where you are in society. And so I'm coming from this like privileged place where I still have my job and like I have my health. And so I have time to worry about the waste. And, obviously that's not the situation for a lot of people. I think it was very like humbling for me to see how much we need each other. And like, I can feel good and pat myself on the back for buying local and bringing my own bag and doing all these things. But then when you see something rock our society like this, you're like, wow, we need each other. We need really good government. We need really good systems. We need to really be invested in protecting our society and like holding those things up. And so I think it was a little humbling, because I feel like in sustainability, you can fall into this trap of being like, oh, I'm going to only just change the things in my personal life, because you can change them like tomorrow. Like I can decide tomorrow not to use any more plastic or whatever. Creating policy change is like a lot less fun. It's a lot longer battle, and it's very complicated. And so I think it's just now for me, like trying to figure out how to continue to communicate these messages, because I guess I got a little jaded by COVID around some of the stuff that it was like my words that I would normally say. I just feel like I was just kind of humbled by it.
Yeah, humbled is I think really appropriate. I think too that COVID, with all the waste, there's so many different aspects of that. This thing we're talking about here. The other thing too, I think maybe for me, it's highlighted has been sometimes the easy answers we have, we need to think more deeply about them. And so, I mean, one example is really the the good impact that plastics have from a medical standpoint. You
Mm-hmm.
can't imagine, all the protective masks, all those kinds of things, the IV tubes, all that stuff. And so more deeply thinking about this problem that we have so that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we realize that maybe we need to think about it differently, because you just can't ban all the plastics. And we think
Yeah.
we've got a cool circular solution here. There's more to it than that. But in these extreme circumstances, thinking differently, I think, is one of the good outcomes of it. At least that's my view.
I agree with that. And I think that like I cover this space so much and I agree with the thinking deeply. And it's one of my goals in my work is to continue to integrate some of these more complicated ideas, because everyone's in a different journey and someone might be just figuring out about plastic pollution yesterday. So like how you communicate to that person versus somebody who's been thinking about this for a very long time, and like the systems and the depth might be different. And like, I agree with you. Like in my videos, I'll be like, this many tons of plastic pollution, or like this many tons of plastic containers. But I'm not saying that provided access to food that was affordable and it was a frozen meal that a working mom used. Like you don't, when I'm saying those stats, I'm not also taking a beat to say what that brought to society. Like, and so I just am taking the waste stat when really like, it's not really waste because it is providing something in our culture. And it's a technology. And I love what you guys are doing. And I love these sort of different, like thinking differently approaches, because I really feel like that's where the whole movement's going. I love, I just had a call earlier today talking about biomimicry and how now science is looking to nature to learn about different ways to solve problems. And I think that's really cool. And then even like thinking about regenerative agriculture, and there's all these conversations around how soil can sequester carbon and we can heal the planet through those practices. And I'm like, these are the solutions that light me up, where it's humans at their best, ingenuitive, at problem solving, becoming stewards of the earth. And I think that's where we need this to go, versus this like humans are bad, do less harm, like just like do the least amount of impact on the planet because we're like a parasite on the planet. And sometimes I feel like that's a communications thing that happens in the environment. And so I don't know, just building off of what you're saying of thinking differently, I think we need that so much in this space to get more people excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And I like what you said there, humans at their best. How do we unleash that, right? And get the messages, and then for you, create the moments, and hopefully with us at Brightmark too, where people think about what are those individual small steps they can take. So I'm curious, in your show, what is, if you were to say, what is your favorite thing or person or something that you've had an opportunity to do on your show there?
Well, I've had a lot of fun. Definitely at any chance I get to go out into the field and like see farmers and see how things are made are my favorites. Last year I did go to Stockholm and I met Greta Thunberg, which was very cool. Kind of when she was up and coming. I credit my senior manager because he just started reaching out to her like so long ago and like ended up booking the interview. And then she's just like her, platform has gotten so big. So that was really cool that I was able to go talk to her for an afternoon and just see the like foundation of like basically a global movement that she built as a 13-year-old, which was very cool. And yeah.
Well, I was going to say, isn't it amazing what the kids can do? I mean, we just had a great example of that. Just like, wow. Like, what was I doing? I was thinking, one of the questions I was going to ask him was, so do you still have to do homework while you're changing the world?
I know. They're wild. They're so good at technology.
Oh, yeah.
I was having this conversation like recently too, like all of a sudden like Gen Z is the darling generation. And I feel like no one ever liked millennials. We just like got pushed over. Everyone was like, all right, we're done. Like, the Gen Z gets such a good like reviews. People love them. As a member of millennial generation, I'm like, hello, we led the way for them.
That's all right. We love what you're doing for sure. One of the ones that you did a recent one, and maybe because we're sort of heading into the holiday season, I thought was really cool. It's not Greta Thunberg or someone like that. You said you like to get out there. Your cranberry farming thing was really cool.
Yeah, the video actually is coming out. I posted a ton of content like that day of like behind the scenes footage, but that video is coming out a week from Monday, November 16th. And it's so cool because cranberry farming, I did not know, has a lot of practices that actually are great for the climate. One is that they're a perennial plant, so they come back every year. So some cranberry plants can be 150 years old, which gives them a deep root system. And so when we're talking about sequestering carbon, any plant that isn't having to get tilled and replanted every year is good because they're just, keeping all that stuff in the ground. Also, what was the other thing? Oh, they need really clean water on a cranberry farm. And so the farm that I went to has 2,000 acres. And of those 2,000 acres, only 135 acres are in production because they need 14 acres of supporting wetlands and woodland to make the water clean enough for that 1 acre of cranberry. So they ended up being really cool little sort of nature preserves in the areas where they farm, which I also loved.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Because they need the water, they have to preserve so much of the surrounding area in order to produce the cranberries. Plus, they're pretty
so that it's
tasty
clean
when you
and
make them
not
up.
contaminated. Oh my God,
Yeah.
they were so bitter. I was like eating them out of the bog. And then also the guy, because they're like an epic family that have been doing this for 7 generations. And he was like, you got to do my cranberry sauce recipe. And he was like, you got to pour Cointreau, which is like an orange liqueur, like into it. So we have that in the video. And at the end I made it and I'm like pouring the liqueur
Was it good?
in. Oh my God, it's so good. I have it canned in my fridge and I'm going to bring it to Thanksgiving.
So
I'll give
when
you
we
the
see the
recipe.
video,
It's a
yeah, I
cup
was
of
going to
sugar.
say,
Yeah.
yeah. Can we have the recipe?
Cup of sugar and you pour the Cointreau till it feels right. So that's
That's gonna be pretty much all of it for me.
I know.
That's
Right?
So all right. You're Bay New York. Are you there now?
I
where
am.
are you?
This
You in your
beautiful
apartment?
fireplace is my apartment in New York. Just kidding. I am.
It's funny. I have one
It's
very much
so
like
weird.
it
I can't
here in
believe
San
the same
Francisco.
one. That's so funny. We have such good taste. My husband and I live in Upper East Side in Manhattan, so we're here, and it's great. We have a roof deck, so that's been like a light. So it's actually like Upper East Side, or actually Manhattan in general. The outside seating's happening now, so every restaurant is like out on the street, and it makes it feel very lively. Although we're now going through a second wave, so it's kind of going back down a little bit, but.
Yeah, I mean, you see that in a lot of the cities in the city here in San Francisco. You've seen a lot of the outdoor seating just because they weren't doing it indoors. So I'm curious, Lucy, like, what are some of the things we should look forward to that you want to tackle, you want to talk about, with your show?
Thanks. That's a great question. I mean, I have so many goals when you like want to create content and be a visual storyteller. And it's sort of like I'm aiming for here and then I'll lucky if I get to like there. So I really want to in 2021 a little bit deeper on some of these questions. So it's like, okay, we're transitioning to new renewable energy. What's going to be the pros and cons? Let's answer some of these questions about wind and solar. Like, should we be doing nuclear? Like, I think a lot of people, we know fossil fuels we need to be getting away, but we don't know a lot about the alternatives. And I think there's a lot of like rumors out there. You're like, oh, is lithium mining bad? Like, I heard you need salt ponds. And so I kind of want to unpack some of these new technologies is one of my goals. Or just do like, again, like answering people's questions. Like, am I supposed to be drinking dairy milk, oat milk, or almond milk? Which one is it? And what are the pros and cons in that situation? These are all very, I mean, I could go so deep on really random topics. I find it's fascinating to see all of the things that are springing up around solutions for our, changing climate and planet. So hopefully I'll just be able to continue like, asking questions and digging deeper into the stuff that I'm curious about. If you have any suggestions, pitches, let me know.
Well, I do have one pitch, which is, and you may, if you were here in the beginning, you heard me talk about the farmers, the dairy farmers in particular, and dairy versus whatever. But I think it'd be really cool. We would be happy to hook you up and host you with one of our dairy farmers, because that's one thing that's interesting to me. And I think we'd be naked and afraid and hungry guy Eric talked about it. I think a lot of our farmers, have to be super sustainable and we forget about this thing. So we'd be happy for you to come out and see one of our.
I would love that. Yeah.
Folks.
Let's do it. I think that, we have these very like black and white conversations that it's like, oh, well, big ag is bad, or like whatever, big plastic, I don't know, like, and then it's like, no, these are all individuals. Everyone's living on the planet and seeing what's happening. And I think the more that we can have solutions coming from all parties, and I think you were saying that at the top, like, it's really about collaboration. And I think that the solutions can come from anywhere. And I hope some of these industries that are not necessarily the best actors now start to just change and see the benefit of being more sustainable.
Totally. And I don't know, when we talked before, if I'd mentioned this, but we were able, along with a gal, she's known as the Farm Babe in the social media community. She's really involved with the
Farm Babe?
Yeah, the Farm Babe. Yeah, the Farm Babe, Michelle. And so, as you may know, Burger King had a few ads out about the cows. It's supposed to be a little bit funny, but actually really serious about methane. And we and Michelle sort of said, hey, maybe you got to think about this more deeply. So what's really amazing is the Burger King folks came up from Miami to Wisconsin and Iowa and engaged with us, collaborated. It was so cool, the results. So I think if we all are a little bit open and more thoughtful and considered, I think we get to much better solutions than being like super dogmatic about it.
I totally agree. And you're seeing companies like Danone and General Mills doing huge regenerative ag initiatives, and they're really happening. I was talking to the head of sustainability for General Mills. She was so excited about regenerative agriculture, and I felt like I was talking to like an environmental, like my buddy, and we were both like, I'm like, this is a company that has such a big reach and so could do so much good, and they have really good people there, and so it just made me feel more hopeful that a lot of people are thinking about this.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's a really good sort of, for me, last question. Maybe we can take some chat questions or something. Are you hopeful? Are you optimistic?
Oh, it depends on the day. Depends on the day. I definitely am lean toward hopeful as a personality. I'm definitely a positive person. So I think I'm just a little bit wired that way. And I do feel hopeful when we talk about these, like I said, when we're talking about these ideas of humans being a steward and being at our best. I think I read in the book Drawdown, which talks about the climate crisis and solutions for it. They say maybe climate change is not something that's happening to us, but it's happening for us to make us step up and to really take up this role as being stewards and healing our planet. And so that's like when I feel hopeful, and I kind of like, it's almost like faith in that. Doesn't mean that I feel that every day. I have good days and bad days, but that's when I do feel good, was just try to think about the big picture like that.
That's a pretty real answer. And I'm sort of with you on it. Sometimes I feel optimistic, sometimes I don't. Let's see if there are any questions here. There's a lot of talk about us doing the mixing and what types of scotch and whiskey. Anything good in there, Savannah?
How's the family composting been going? My family is so annoying because they like, if I'm not there, they like forget to compost. I'm like, really? You guys can't even like compost? I set up a compost bin for my parents in quarantine, and my mom's like, oh, I forgot. And I'm like, yeah. See, now we're talking about like, making people do stuff. I can't even get my own parents. But every time I'm there, I make sure I compost. And there's been some pests, but I've been able to block them out with like rocks. And it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's like you go out the door and then you come back in real quick and watch them. So, are you still composting?
Set up a camera.
Yeah, exactly.
Should I answer Forrest's question? What's your advice?
Yeah.
What's your advice for companies like Brightmark who want to expand their reach as a global brand working on waste solutions? That's a really good question. I don't know. I don't work at a big company, but I guess for me as a storyteller, I'm always trying to think about how it relates to the individual person. And for us, the videos that do the best are the very like tactile videos. So if I'm talking about a bulk shampoo store that has every bottle you can refill your bottles there and sustainable, I start with this thought of like, every month I'm throwing away this shampoo bottle. Like, this is so frustrating. And that's a thought that like everyone can relate to. And so I'm always like thinking, or when you order delivery food and then you feel really guilty because you've all the waste, like just kind of like thinking of these thoughts that we all have, and then from that initial thought, building it out to a bigger concept. If that's helpful.
It makes sense to me. No, that's the kind of stuff that Crystal and Savannah, our team, think about all the time. How do you connect with people? Yeah, so we can have an impact with our brand. Oh yeah, so Clark has one. He loves your optimism and enthusiasm. Have you found any good, I know the answer to this, any good urban composting options in New York?
Yes, there's a great composting program in New York, and they're awesome. They're called the Lower East Side Ecology Center. They run all of these composting drop-off sites in the city. So there's like 70 drop-offs. So I actually keep my food waste in our freezer, which fills up sometimes and probably annoys my husband because I have to go like every week. And then I take it to the farmer's market and I drop it off, and then they compost it for me, which is a great option. And it's great because then it makes me go to the farmer's market and get down there and do that. It's hard though, because you need to compost, you need land. And I think what's happening with New York right now is there's a lot of budget cuts, and we're seeing some of our composting sites having their leases challenged, like they're not able to like afford their rent, or like they're going to get kicked out. And it's so frustrating because New York is a sustainable city and they have all these like zero waste goals as a city, and then they're not like, you know, supporting these composting local programs. And that was a huge wake up call for me, because during COVID it got canceled, the composting program. And I was like, wow, I try to be sustainable, but if these programs in this city doesn't support me, there's very little that I can do on my own. And so we really need people who actually support these things and don't just say it and like check a box and then don't act against these programs.
Yeah, well, and if you support it, you should probably engage with our leaders and politicians, future politicians, right, as well.
Yeah.
To help make it happen. Okay, there looks like there's another one there, unless we're out of time.
I think we'll just take one more question.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it looks like we're about to run the clock. But thank you. I'll answer this question, but thank you all for having me. I really have enjoyed this event, and I'm mad I haven't won anything yet, but I'm going to try to answer some trivia.
I bet you'll get a prize eventually.
Okay. I love your balanced worldview and practical solutions. With your program, how do you approach engaging with a broad spectrum of people, activists, industry, government, to tell a balanced story? That's a great question. And I think that is something that I'm always like, that's always like, you know, a guiding principle of trying to, you know, include different perspectives and be balanced. It doesn't always work. Sometimes just like going with an easy story that I know our audience will love is like sometimes the path that I take. But I think it's a matter of just taking a concerted effort and realizing who we cover and who I talk to is varied. It has different backgrounds. And that's just the best way to do it. I think I'm just always getting better as a storyteller to be able to bring more depth to stuff than just sort of like the easiest, you know, easiest pass on a story. So, yeah.
Awesome. Great.
You can give me suggestions. You can email me. I can just put my email in the thing.
Okay. Hey, Lucy.
And I'll have to just
go ahead.
I would say, well, I'll have to see you at the cow farm.
Yeah, we're going to make that happen for sure. So don't worry, we'll follow up on that. I am actually really inspired by you and watching all of your content, your enthusiasm. It's very inspiring. And so really cool of you to join us. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Is it happy hour now?